So if you're a type 1 diabetic and you have been trying to lose belly fat for a while now and it's just not happening the way that you want it, then I'd say you're not on your own. So I see it constantly with the guys, with the girls that I work with on a weekly basis. And most of the stuff out there online about fat loss assumes a body that doesn't have to think about insulin every 2 hours or what your sugars are doing at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. So you crack on with a plan. It might work for a few weeks, then numbers get a little bit messy, then you fall off, and then you end up blaming yourself for it. And honestly, that's not really on you. That's the advice not being built for your body, the body that you actually have. I'm a type 1 diabetic myself, and I coach type 1 diabetics through this every single week. And there's about 5 things that I'd want to go through with you that the standard fat loss advice just doesn't get into. So I'll work through them one by one. And at the end of the call today, hopefully come away with a clear plan to lose that belly fat. One quick thing before we hop into it. I'm not your nurse, I'm not your endo, and I'm not going to pretend that I am. But what I am is someone who lives with this, who's pushed it pretty hard in sport over the years, competed up until an international level for multiple years and have multiple national records with type 1 diabetes. And I've worked through fat loss every single week while doing this. So everything we're going through today is coaching stuff, not medical advice. The two are different, but both matter. So with that out of the way, here are the 5 things that I wish someone had said to me when I was starting out. And that I end up saying to most type 1 clients in the first couple of weeks working together. To give you an outline for today, we're going to go through 5 things. First, what's actually harder when you're type 1? Then what isn't harder, even though you think it might be. After that, the big one that's quietly costing most type 1 diabetics the bulk of their progress, and then how long this really takes. And then we're going to shift into how we approach the whole thing. It's a lot more than most people actually expect. So first thing, what is actually harder? Fat loss with type 1 is harder. Not impossibly harder, but harder in a few specific ways that we should be straight about. First, the hypo and then overeating loop. Your blood sugars drop, then your brain tells you to eat. You take in more than you needed to get back up. And over the week, that can wipe out your entire calorie deficit. I've seen this time and time again with clients, and it's not a discipline thing, it's just biology. And honestly, it's the biggest single reason why type 1 diabetics can't seem to lose fat, no matter how clean they're eating in between the lows. Secondly, glucose variability. Your numbers move around. They move with stress, with sleep, with training, with the time of the day, sometimes even with the weather. And when the numbers are messy, every other part of the plan gets harder with them. Your hunger is harder to read, your training quality drops, your sleep gets knocked off course, and this all compounds. The third thing is going to be the mental load. So you're already managing a chronic condition every 2 hours. Adding fat loss on top of that is asking a brain that's already doing a part-time job in the background to take on another one. So this means that plans that would be totally okay for a non-diabetic might just be too much weight for someone who's also managing diabetes alongside of it. These are real. They're not excuses, but they're not the end of the world. They just mean the plan needs to be designed around them rather than ignoring them or fighting against them, which happens way too frequently. Okay, now getting on to our second point, what isn't harder? So on the flip side of that, a lot of you might think what's harder actually isn't. A calorie deficit still works the same way. It works for everyone else. Insulin doesn't break thermodynamics. If we're in a real deficit, fat comes off. It is as simple as that. Building muscle is the same. With strength training, enough protein, and a decent recovery, your body builds muscle the same way that anyone else's does. There's no type 1 exception clause with this, and your metabolism isn't broken. This one comes up tons in calls. People think that somehow type 1 has just wrecked their metabolism and that they're starting from worse grounds than a non-diabetic. They're not. Your resting metabolic rate is driven by your size, your muscle mass, your age, your sex, same as everyone else. And the reason this matters is that most of the despair around fat loss with type 1 comes from believing that the whole thing is rigged against you. And I'll be honest with you, it's just not. There's a few extra rules, but the underlying body works the same. So if you've been carrying around the idea that you're starting from a worse place, I'd say it's worth letting that go right away. It's not doing anything for you. Okay, now on to point number 3, and this is the big one. Honestly, if you can take one thing away from the video, I would want it to be this. So your post-hypo overeating is the thing that is quietly costing you most of your fat loss. I touched on it a few minutes ago, but it deserves its own slot because of how big it is for type 1 diabetics. And what happens here is you're at 3.5 millimoles, your brain panics, you grab juice, biscuits, a few jellies, whatever is nearest, and then 10 minutes later, you're at 9. 20 minutes later, after that, you're at 13. So now you correct that. And in the middle of it all, you've taken in 300, 400, sometimes even 500 calories that weren't in your plan. And if that's happening twice a week, that's 600 to 1000 extra calories on top of what you've already planned for. So most of your weekly deficit is gone, sometimes all of it. And then we spent the whole week being disciplined, eating well, training hard, and the scale isn't moving. And you don't really know why. Because those hypocorrection calories aren't sitting in your tracker, they aren't in your plan, they feel like emergencies, not actually food. But the body still counts them, every single one of them. And what we'd be doing here are two main things. So, firstly, working on reducing how often the lows are happening in the first place. So, tracking the patterns, looking at where they're showing up, what's around them, we can definitely help to spot those patterns to bring in and make the changes. Second thing is having a planned response when lows do happen. For this, we need it to be measured, pre-decided. 15 grams of fast-acting glucose, then wait, then retest, then reassess. Not a snack attack from the cupboard at 3 in the morning. Because I'll be honest with you, the type 1 clients I work with who get the leanest aren't the most disciplined ones. They're the ones who have stopped having to recover from 2 to 3 hypos per week. And to give an example, here's Frankie, who went from this while starting a new job in the process. He didn't even know where he was going to train. He didn't even know what his schedule was going to be like, but he still committed to the process. He committed to making a change, and you can see the difference in body composition. The changes that we can make here when we crack down on this stuff are huge. Right, this next one might be not what you want to hear, but I'd rather we be straight about it now than have you frustrated in 6 months when the timeline doesn't match what someone on TikTok promised you. And it's not because your body's broken. It's because the deficit that you can sustainably hold is smaller than a non-diabetics. And your training intensity ceiling is a bit more sensitive to what your numbers are doing, and your weekly variability is higher overall. Therefore, for most type 1s I work with, half a pound to a pound a week is the sweet spot. Sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more. So that's around 25 to 40 pounds a year, which means if you're carrying an extra 30 or 40 pounds of fat that you would like to drop, that's around 9 months to a year of structured work. And I know that sounds slow, but that is the way I think about this. Most type 1s I meet have been spinning their wheels for 5, 10, 15 years. Starting plans, falling off, starting again, regaining what they lost. So when I tell them it's going to take 9 months to be in the leanest shape of their adult life, they think it's slow. But compared to 15 years of nothing, 9 months is nothing. And the mistake we tend to make is comparing our timeline to the non-diabetic guy on TikTok who lost 30 pounds in 12 weeks. That's not our benchmark. Your benchmark is the version of you who never started. Compared to that, every month forward is a win. And the great thing about this is when we do it sustainably, you will never have to go back. So set the expectation honestly, half a pound a week, around 9 months for a real change, and then you maintain it after, rather than just hitting it for the photo and then going back to old habits. And this is the one I would genuinely like you to take with you, if you remember anything else from this video or not, because there is a shift in how we approach this whole thing that, in my experience, changes a lot more than people expect going in. What happens with most type 1 diabetics trying to lose fat is that they treat the diabetes as the obstacle, the thing in the way, the thing slowing them down. So they push against it, they follow plans built for non-diabetics, they try to bolt diabetes management on top or along the side of it. What we'd actually be doing is building the management as the foundation, and then the fat loss sits on top of it. So predictable numbers first, steady meals first, strength training that improves your insulin sensitivity first, sleep first, and then the deficit goes on top of all of that. And the non-diabetic builds the deficit and hopes their body holds together around it. With us, we build the foundation first, and then the deficit sort of becomes the side effect of doing the foundation properly. And honestly, once that clicks, you've already got an edge. You're already tracking more data than the average person in the gym ever will. And you're already paying attention to food, your timing, your recovery, your response. So you've been training for this for years without even realizing it. And that same awareness that makes diabetes feel like a burden is what makes fat loss feel more predictable for you and makes it actually come easier to us type 1 diabetics. And once the plan is set up, to use it rather than to fight it, we are going to be onto some very, very good changes here. A great example of someone who made this shift mentally is Carlos, who'd been bouncing on and off with plans for years, came on board with ourselves, and then he went from 225 pounds to 175 pounds over the course of about 13 to 14 weeks. And the thing is, during that time, he wasn't doing anything that was unsustainable, unrestricted, or that he didn't enjoy. And he's in the same position now 6 months later and has improved his strength, improved his energy, and he's happy where he currently is. He hasn't bounced back to old habits. So I suppose if I were to sum up the whole thing, fat loss with type 1 is not impossible. And it isn't even that much harder once you actually understand what's different about it. Because the reason it felt impossible up until now is because you've been following plans that ignored your condition, given by people who don't actually have it, and then blaming yourself when the plans broke against your reality. Again, that's not on you, that's on the advice. When the plan respects what's actually going on with you, with your body, it responds the same way anyone's does. And honestly, sometimes faster because you're more in tune with what's going on than most people ever will be. So if you wanted to start applying some of this from this week, I'll be looking at 5 things. First, track your hypos for the next couple of weeks. The time, the severity, what triggered them, what you ate. Honestly, this is the single biggest thing that actually moves the needle. Secondly, build 3 to 4 meals that you can actually repeat. You want protein-led plates, plenty of fiber in there, consistent spacing throughout the day. Predictability is the edge here. Third, get strength training in. So strength sessions 2 to 4 times per week, progressing the loads over time. And fourth, set a moderate deficit, around 250 to 400 calories below maintenance, not too aggressive, sustainable, using foods that you actually enjoy. And then fifth, adjust the expectations around your timeline. £0.5 a week, 9 months of structured work for a proper change, not 9 weeks. And if you're a type 1 diabetic and you would like a hand building a plan that's actually set up around the body that you have, rather than someone else's, pop over to Instagram and shoot me a message, owen.keely, that's EOIN.KEALY, with the word T1D, and I'll take you through next steps from there. And if you do want to get into how to actually train without your numbers going chaotic on you every single session, that's what we go through in the next one. I'll see you there.